This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Police have issued an all-points bulletin for a well-dressed young white man seen running from the scene. Officers also reportedly chased and fired on a radio-equipped car containing two white men. Dr. King was standing on the balcony of a second-floor hotel room tonight when, according to a companion, a shot was fired from across the street. In the friend's words, the bullet exploded in his face. Police, who have been keeping a close watch over the Nobel Peace Prize winner because of Memphis' turbulent racial situation, were on the scene almost immediately. They rushed the 39-year-old Negro leader to a hospital where he died of a bullet wound in the neck.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now.
My name is Miss Joanne Dawson. I am from New York City. I was 14 years old at the time that Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated.
I'm Stan Johnson. I'm from Philadelphia. Now, at the time that Dr. King was assassinated, I was 30 years old in a Charlottesville, Virginia jail.
I'm Leo Burrs Jr., and the day that I heard that Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered, assassinated, was a very sad time for me.
My name is Ivy C. Butler. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and I was 36 years old when that happened.
My name is Tony Bolin. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm 60 years old. I was 11 at the time that Martin Luther King was assassinated.
My name is Sarah Matthews. I am from Chicago, Illinois. I was 17 years of age when Dr. King was assassinated. I was standing on my girlfriend's porch when I received the news. I had a babysitting job after school. I attended Edwin G. Cooley High School, and I had to walk to the babysitter's house. And as I was walking down the street, I saw all of these individuals in her neighborhood running, and I asked someone what was going on, and I believe that I saw a senior citizen, and she said that Dr. King had been assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. I went in to the babysitter's house. Initially, I just kind of stood there and watching the younger people in the neighborhood running down the street to the various stores that was in her community. And I turned on the TV, and it was a very sad and emotional time for me because my parents often talked about Dr. King, but I know that I called my mom and she told me to come home and that she needed to talk to me and to talk to my siblings and explain to us how it was important for us to carry on his work. And I asked her, why did someone kill him? And she said, I can't really remember exactly what she said, but she said that it was individuals who did not want to see his work carry on because he was trying to make a difference for individuals who were less fortunate than we were. And all I could remember was one of the films that I saw, and I actually started watching TV. She called all of us in the room, me and my siblings and my dad, and we just sat there and we watched the TV. We watched how other individuals were crying, and it really makes me want to cry now because I really didn't understand why someone had to kill him. And I remember that the clouds, it was very cloudy that day, and it was very dark, and it just seemed very somber in the neighborhood. And I understood after a while why the people in the neighborhood was protesting and burning down, unfortunately, their own neighborhood, because they had no outlet. I had my parents and we had each other, and I remember my mother praying and saying, don't give up hope, and just to continue to try to do the work that Dr. King had started. And I remember calling my friends later and discussing it with them, and we were all just very sad on that day, and it just seemed like the whole world had stopped just for an instant, or just for that short period of time. It just seemed like nothing was moving, nothing was going to go forward, and there just seemed to be at that moment for me as a 17-year-old that there was no hope, and that we would not be able to carry on the work that Dr. King did. But there was one thing that stuck in my mind that my mom talked about, was why he was in Memphis, and that he was fighting for the people on the trash trucks, and that those were the individuals who were not given equal right, equal access, equal pay, and that education was our way to make sure that we could have a better life, and make sure that Dr. King's dream would not perish. And she thought, as Dr. King did, that education and equal rights and equal access would improve the quality of life for all of us.
I remember getting into a fight, well, not a fight, but an argument with the two guys that I was in jail with, because I cried for 3 days, and they didn't understand why I was crying, but they didn't understand the significance of Dr. King and who he was. But I did, and at that time I just cried, and in getting in a fight about the fact that he had been killed and why he was killed. I knew of the racial tensions in the country, and I knew a lot. I had read and saw a lot of things on the news about Dr. King, and I was just devastated.
When the day that Dr. Martin Luther King got killed, I was at work, and on that Saturday, they started rioting in Baltimore because Dr. King had got killed. And I was coming from work, in which I was living in the 2100 block of Federal Street at that time. And I got in the house, and we couldn't walk up and down the street. We was upstairs looking out. I was upstairs looking out the window, and then we saw the National Guards telling everybody to go in the house. And the people started rioting, and we was in the house for the whole weekend. We couldn't come out, couldn't go to church, couldn't do anything. And that Monday, I was able to go back to work that Monday while there was rioting, and then a lot of people got locked up. So many people got locked up that they carried them to the Civic Center downtown because the jails were overloaded.
I remember that the principal came on the PA system and said that all of the children would go home early because of the loss of Dr. Martin Luther King. I remember walking home with my brother, and we were saying that we knew my father would be very, very sad, and my mother would be upset because Dr. Martin Luther King's name was a household worldly name to us.
It's hard to remember exactly where I was at that time, but I do remember his assassination. I remember the sadness and the sorrow that we all felt when we heard he was gone. It was like a piece of us had been destroyed and just been dismissed, and we were real saddened by it. We didn't talk about it a lot in my home at the time, because my mother, she was a very religious person, so her focus was always on her faith and how she believed and what she believed in. And so, but I do remember the things that occurred at that time. I remember the riot that ensued because of that, and it was really kind of rough, but we didn't get involved in any of that because my mother, she kept us away from that, and we knew not to bring anything that was stolen into the house. I was afraid as a child because I didn't really understand really what was going on. I didn't really understand the impact of what was going on. Only thing I do know that it was like unsettling for me. I was a little bit nervous about it. I didn't feel comfortable going outside. I remember that they had a curfew at 6 o'clock, and I remember that. As soon as I was in school at the time, of course, and I remember as soon as school was out, we came straight home, and we wouldn't go back outside until the next day. So it was a frightening time to be a kid.
I was living in Fairfax County, Virginia. My roommate was Jim Scott, who's the executive director of the Fairfax Community Action Program, and I, of course, was the director of community development for the Fairfax Community Action Program, which was the poverty program at that time. And I was greatly impacted. I was sad. I cried. I was shocked, although we knew he was under threat, because I had come out of the civil rights movement as a leader in Baltimore City with the Civic Interest Group as public relations director and recruitment chair, and also working with Walter Carter, who was the president of the Baltimore City chapter of the Congress of Racial Equality. So I had a great affinity for Dr. King, and I was especially saddened because I knew him personally. I had a chance to meet him on one occasion when he came to the Prince Hall Masonic Temple here in Baltimore City in April of 1964. And so knowing he was a great guy and a great leader, it was traumatic for me because I knew he was under threat. We knew he might be assassinated. He knew he might be assassinated, but I was impacted because I knew I could be assassinated because I was also an outspoken, aggressive advocate for civil rights and justice and decency for black and poor people in this country. So again, I called my father, I called my family here in Baltimore City. I called on other friends of mine around Maryland and Virginia, just to say that, we thought it would happen. And now that it had happened, we had to rededicate, we had to recommit ourselves to the struggle for justice and decency. And that's the sum and substance of it. I will forever be traumatized by his death. It was a horrible situation. It's something I'll never forget. And yet it's motivational in the sense that I know it's my charge, it's my responsibility to carry on the work that he laid the groundwork for.
Every now and then I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral, and I don't think of it in a morbid sense. Every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would want said? And I leave the word to you this morning. If any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. Every now and then I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's that's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others.